What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today, well, we're going to be talking about the Illuminate, our new faction that we'll be facing off with in Helldivers 2. Finally, we've got some injection of a new and additional content that's been long awaited for some time now. It was getting quite dry and quite boring, but thankfully now we're on that thrill ride of an experience where it's almost like the first time facing off with the automatons again. But overall, there's more than a few new features, new enemy types to face off with, and it is truly only the beginning, as this will be the first of many enemy types we'll be facing off with. It may seem a little bit easy after we give you those tips and tricks, but it will get more challenging in the future as we go forward. But that being said, we've got more than a few tips and tricks on facing off with the Illuminate, and we'll get into it right now. Now, first things first, we need to talk about the enemy units, starting off with the smallest of them, which is going to be that squid zombie that you may have seen in masses going out from every one of those fabricators, the squid fabricators, and everywhere in the streets. They're just flooding just about everywhere, giant crowds of them, and it's quite enjoyable to actually face off with them until they're all surrounding you at one time, but thankfully we do get a melee weapon now that can hold them at bay and finish them off quite nicely. But besides that, the quickest way to take them down is either by landing those headshots, but beyond those moments there can be at least 2 rounds needed for every single one of the body shots, so if you're looking to get that guaranteed one shot every time, even if you're not aiming at the head, try shooting them at the kneecaps. Cutting them down at the kneecaps is actually the second, if not the same rate of how fast you can actually take down one of them by just shooting them in the head, as they will end up having some moments where even without a head they'll still continue to move forward and strike for a moment. But at the same time, it does end up being a little bit of a comical moment as they'll start to crawl forward towards you, but inevitably end up bleeding out. And it is also one of the few ways you can end up slowing down the crowd by just churning through with possibly something like a Stalwart or even Liberator, as most of the assault rifles feel a good bit better now that we do have these large portions of chaff that we'll need to deal with. But later on, who knows whether or not they'll be able to keep up with the new enemy units we will be seeing in the coming future. Just after that, we've got the medium unit, or the elite unit, that has the melee that will end up just bum rushing forward and striking you and throwing you to the ground, and sometimes just putting you into a stun lock moment where the squids all surround you and it's just tossing you around, and it's quite the frustrating moment. But the best way to actually take these guys down, especially if you have a light armor penetrating weapon, is you'll notice they do have a good bit of body armor on them that will end up being medium armor, but you can actually blow it off after some sustained fire. So generally what you're going to want to do is aim for one portion of the body and sustain fire on that one portion until you've blown off that armor, and then hit the soft weakened spot underneath that is now unarmored. And that is going to be one of the fastest ways to get that done, besides getting headshots with something of a medium armor penetrating weapon, because you will not be able to blow off the head armor. Every other piece of the body you will be able to blow off the armor, but sadly enough the head armor will not end up blowing off at a later point. But technically you can hit the neck, and that does end up being a weak spot as well that may end up having less of a health bar connected to the head, but it's a bit of a harder shot to make. Just after that though, we've got the most irritating unit that we've got to deal with over here, almost as irritating as the Hunter, but thankfully there's not as many as the Hunters over there on the Terminate side of things, which is going to be the flying elite unit that seems to bob and weave like a little mosquito in your face and just consistently deals massive amounts of damage, and is just irritating to pinpoint with some of that fire in certain moments. But the fastest way that we'll be able to take this one down is similar to the elite one that does melee, in which we will be able to blow off the armor in certain portions of it, the legs, the chest, and this time we will be able to get some headshots on this one. But the fastest way we will actually be able to take this down is by shooting the jetpack on its back. Now sometimes this isn't going to be the easiest if they have your back to you. You know, this is one of those co-op moments where you can kind of get somebody to take the aggro of it, and if you've got the line of sight on the back side of them, you'll be able to blow off that jetpack really easy. But you can actually blow up the jetpack from the front side of them, as generally there will be a little bit of the jetpack exposed from that left side. It'll be just over their shoulders, so if you have a weapon with some decent zoom to it, like the Counter Sniper Diligence, generally you may be able to land those shots with some decent accuracy and actually blow them up very easily. Now this one is a bit tricky, especially when they're bobbing all over the place and they're just dancing in the air. But if you can land those shots, it's going to be the fastest way to take them down, outside of using the Purifier or certain support weapons like the HMG, the autocannon, or even just headshots from the anti-material rifle, which seems to be pretty decent at taking out most of these units with just headshots by themselves. The anti-material rifle is perfect for a stealth run against the squids. And we're talking about stealth. When it comes down to our next unit, the drone, you make sure that you light this thing up every single time that you see it, or at least any time that it ends up going towards you with that big purple light on the front of it, as it is the only unit that will be able to call in one of those squid drops. It's very similar to the humanoid bots on the automaton front, as the rest of the units, even the tripod, won't be able to call in those drops. But as soon as you see that thing, make sure you're turning that thing into quick scrap so that it has no capability of dropping any one of those squids directly on top of you, as if you can keep an eye out for these things and stop them every single time, you're going to have a much smoother experience against the Illuminate. And coming up last, when it comes down to our final unit, the War of the Worlds, the giant tripod. This thing has quite the laser on the front side of it, and that thing is ready to vaporize any one of the Helldivers, and God help you if that thing lands on your head, because it almost feels like instant death. It's like that flamethrower from the Charger back in the day where one ember would touch you and you were just instantly dead. That's how it ends up feeling here. Now, the eyeball seems to be the focus everybody is more than likely thinking is the best weak spot to hit when facing off with the tripod, but the reality is every single support weapon is actually going to do a whole lot better, especially the anti-tanks. You may have noticed the recoilless isn't doing too great against the Illuminate, but even then, it's not going to take one shot from the recoilless to actually take down one of these tripods if you shoot it in that eyeball. But if you do end up shooting any one of the anti-tanks at one of the leg joints, similar to with what we would do with the flamethrower versus the Charger, hitting that top portion of the kneecap will actually be able to one-shot any one of the tripods. I'd say the only anti-tank weapon that's actually worthwhile taking in versus the Illuminate right now is going to be the Commando, because you've got 4 instant shots without having to wear a backpack that will be able to take out 4 different tripods as long as you get the aim down on that leg joint right there. As soon as you get that aim down, you're going to be knocking these things down left and right, and they're going to be very easy to take down for you. And from that point, any one of the other support weapons are going to be able to get this done as well. You'll just need to aim for that leg joint, and you'll be taking these out easy peasy. And another tip to throw out there when it comes down to the orbital gas strike, apparently this thing, if you just throw this over onto one of the fabricators, it will instantly destroy it regardless of whether or not the shields are down. For whatever reason, it just has a direct impact that instantly destroys any one of those squid fabricators. So every minute you'll have the capability of destroying one of those. If you want to throw that in, it can be pretty decent at the crowd control from a lot of those squid zombies, but at that same time it does have another useful perk to it now with destroying fabricators instantly against the Illuminate. The next tip we're going to talk about is where to find the vehicle. A lot of people, while I was streaming, were asking, where is the vehicle stratagem? Well, it's not going to be a stratagem. It'll actually just be a random spawn on any one of the maps, and I'm not sure whether or not it's only on the urban environment or urban environment maps for the Illuminate. But as soon as you drop in and you just open your mini-map, you should be able to see an icon on the map somewhere that looks like that little Warthog vehicle. If you do end up seeing that, well, that's exact location where you're going to be able to find that. But if you don't see that icon anywhere on the map, sadly enough, it has not spawned on that map for you. I will say it is a good bit of fun to be able to drive this thing around and be able to just kind of go from objective to objective, and it's not exactly the weakest thing ever, but I will say it does have some realism to it. If you do end up going a little bit joyriding and somebody's on the gunner, do try to make sure that you're not doing any barrel rolls or going too fast in certain portions, and then start going and lifting it up a little bit sideways, as you will actually throw the person from the turret straight out of the vehicle, and wherever they're landing, well, sometimes the impact damage might be hard enough to finish off that Helldiver for good. And the last tip that we'll be throwing out there is how to destroy the Scrambler, which I will say this is so much better than the Stratagem Jammer over there on the automaton side of things. I'm so happy that I can actually still input a code, even though I am getting scrambled and the code is constantly changing. I do have the capability of still calling something in, even if I'm under its actual debuff, if you will. But you may be wondering how you'll actually destroy this. There's some people out there that may just end up calling in an Eagle airstrike and it ends up destroying it, but not actually knowing the exact way that you can get this done by just utilizing primary weapons. If you head over to the Spire's location that's shooting up all of that blue Illuminate light up into the air, you'll actually find that around those spots will be something of like electrical generators, some type of relay system, and it seems as though they have these blue little consoles on each one of these devices that might be energy converters. This is their way of siphoning the energy and transferring it in a radio wave frequency over and transitioning it over to whatever their device is. Somehow this is how they're actually siphoning it off. But generally there'll be 4 of these just in the square location around wherever that spire is, and all you'll need to do is shoot those and destroy them. Now don't get too close, as it will have a massive explosive radius with some pretty serious damage that'll blow back from it. But as soon as you destroy all 4 of those, you'll completely destroy the capability of them jamming you, and you will end up getting that objective complete for the mission. But that's going to be all the tips I have for the Illuminate right now. It has been a fantastic thrill ride to have some of this new content inside of Helldivers 2, and I can't wait to see how this actually goes forward. I really can't wait to see whether or not we end up having less filler major orders, and now hopefully Arrowhead is kind of on the track. They've caught up with what they need to do, and more than likely, I'd like to see some of the story progression happen at least once every single month, where we get a little bit of this new content, maybe some new stratagem, and maybe some new enemy types, or even just a progression of what's happening with the gloom, maybe the cyborgs walking out with the automatons going side by side, new little enemy types in that moment. But hopefully there's a lot of things we'll see coming here in the short future. I know they will continue to keep pumping this out. This is definitely one of those games you can just drop it and then come back and have a fantastic time. The core gameplay loop is always there, and it's the thing that everybody loves about this game. And every time you come back to it, especially when they're putting in new content, you get that same feeling again like when you first dropped in. And there's nothing better than that moment. And I think everybody's having that feeling when it comes down to actually coming back for the Illuminate and having a little bit of that fresh and new type of play style with that same great core gameplay loop. And even with those zombie squids, it just makes it even better, and they have really captured the ambiance here, as it just feels good every single time I'm dropped in with the Illuminate. Now, whether or not they can sustain this and keep that torch and just run with it is something that we'll see in the coming future. I will definitely guarantee that they will continue to keep producing great quality content like this, where you'll come back and truly enjoy it. But how often they'll be able to drop that is the real question we'll see coming forward. But let me know down in the comments below how you're feeling about it, how you're feeling about the new Illuminate coming in, and if there's any tips that I possibly missed, let me know down in the comments below. I'll pin those comments for other people that are watching the video. And in the coming future, I will be doing the best primary weapons, or a primary weapon tier list for the Illuminate, as well as support weapons and some of those stratagems, and then building out some of the best loadouts for facing off with the Illuminate, as it does kind of shake things up with the diversity of what options you really should be choosing when facing off with the Illuminate themselves. But that being said, hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, and if you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description below. Follow me over at Twitch. We'll be streaming, and on that note, have a good one.